Greetings and peace to you. I hope you're well and in good health, with a sober mind and in spiritual equilibrium. Today we continue the reading of Imitation of Mary, chapter 8, Choice of a State of Life. Mary sought God and loved him alone from her earliest years. For this reason, she drew down upon herself all his blessings, and he, on his part, provided a suitable state of life for her so that she might carry out his plans for her. To make the right choice of a vocation, we need a conjunction of events and circumstances, such as Providence ordinarily provides for faithful souls who consult God on the choice of a state of life. Can a young man hope that God will bestow this favor on him if he meanwhile is abandoning himself to the deadly urges of his own newfound passions? By means of her marriage to Saint Joseph, God, in his providence, enabled Mary to gather the previous fruit of the virtues she had practiced so faithfully. If it had been left to the world to choose a husband for Mary, it would undoubtedly have chosen a rich and talented man. It would not have thought of choosing a virtuous man, a man who, from childhood, had lived reverently before God. That is not the way the world thinks. Self-interest and purely human considerations are the motivating forces behind most marriages. The possessions which chance bestows, rather than the blessings of grace, lead to the contracting of marriages. The result is the many marriages between ill-suited partners, each of whom is the other's torment. God permits this to happen as an earthly punishment for those who do not consult him on so important a matter that can have a deadly outcome if not guided by him. He permits it as a punishment for the youthful carelessness that makes men fail to match the protestation of virtue with its practice. The choice by Mary's parents, or rather by God, fell upon Joseph, an upright man. In fact, the most virtuous man then living on earth, and the one most worthy to be the Holy Virgin's husband. No marriage ever turned out more happily. Never were two hearts more delighted at their union. What trials could ever disturb their peace of soul? Mary and Joseph were in the state of life God wanted for them. Many are dissatisfied with their state. They suffer a great deal from it, and often make others suffer as well. And the reason is that they are in a state God did not want for them. It is to such people that the prophet speaks, "Woe to you, children that have abandoned my providential care and made plans without consulting me." Isaiah 31. A vocation is an important grace that includes many others. Be unfaithful to that grace, and you cannot expect the others. If you refuse this special providence, which provides extraordinary graces for the person who is disposed to follow the divine will, you fall under an ordinary providence, which provides only ordinary graces, with which indeed you can be saved, but with greater difficulty. Pray to the Lord, therefore, and consult him if you are deciding on a state of life. Say to him with the prophet, "Lord, show me the way you want me to walk." Psalm 143:8. Live so that the Lord may see in you a fit subject for his special care. If the Lord's will is not clear to you, consult those who on earth are his representatives. They will enlighten you on what you should do. Jesus struck Saul to the earth on the road to Damascus, yet he did not directly make known to him his plans for him. Instead, he sent him to Ananias, who would reveal them to him. Consult your parents only insofar as duty may require this. For it is always to be feared that they may give their children advice inspired by the principles of the world. A man's enemies will be those in his own household. Matthew 10:36. Finally, consult death, as it were. That is, make the choice you will wish you had made as your life is drawing to its end. Thus ends the reading. I feel it appropriate to comment here because this is a very delicate and difficult issue. It's kind of embedded somewhat and built up to in the previous chapters, but the primary vocation is to draw near to God, to make God your highest value, and it's from that restructuring of the hierarchy of values in your life and the living out of that hierarchy, of spending time with the Lord in quiet, in silence, alone, that we prepare ourselves for communication, for inspirations, for discernment. There are many people who go to church, who have goodwill towards God, and particularly young people who are obsessed, even oppressed by the thought, what is my vocation? What am I supposed to do? Meanwhile, they barely have a prayer life. If they do say their prayers, it's maybe a rosary every now and again, maybe prayers before meals, prayers before bed, very minimal. And it's actually an inversion, a misdirection. I shouldn't be focusing on the grand scheme of what's God's overarching plan for my life. I should be focusing on the day-to-day opportunities to draw near to Him, to pull away from the world, to listen for Him, to love Him. And if I'm faithful to that day to day, organically, naturally, without having to strive or strain or stress, my vocation in that broad sense, in that large sense, will become clearer. Marriage, priesthood, religious life, career of some kind, whatever it is. So, also of note, and this is particularly for young men if they happen to be watching, this is definitely written in the older conception of vocation. St. Alphonsus Liguori talks about this as well. I think St. Thomas may even touch on it, that if you choose a vocation that God did not desire for you, there will be just enough grace for you to be saved, but not much else. The problem with that, there is some truth to it, but it's a radical reduction of the understanding of interior life. So, interior life is in some sense the cultivation and inculcation of the divine life, the heavenly deposit in my soul now. And it's just a matter of fact that the religious state allows, just by the practice of the lifestyle, allows for a greater pressing in, and thus, potentially, a deeper cooperation in and reception of the sanctifying grace, the divine life, holiness. And those saving graces will pour out onto the people around me. They won't just save me. They'll help and aid the salvation of the world around me, whether I'm in, right now I'm talking about religious life, but the married state, and this is where I think that the church needs to, forgive me, that's my alarm for homeschool aid in an hour. I think the church really does need to radically rethink formation in general. I think all Catholics should, from 16 to 35, be required at some point in that time frame to spend at least 2 years in a religious community, to learn how to pray and to listen to the Lord, so that if they get called to marriage, or if they choose marriage, they can do that freely and have a foundation of interior life. I hope that makes sense. I feel like I haven't treated the topic well enough, but there's another aspect, and why I say this is particularly for young men. I experienced in my own prayer life, early on in my conversion, I could go and choose and be a priest, or I could get married, and God's love for me would not change. And so, this idea that it's true that the married life, by its nature, you have a kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, by the nature of it, you are then caught in the active life. You have very sparse, rarefied times, unless you somehow have been blessed with children who go to bed early or stay in bed late, and you can get up early and pray to the Lord. It's very difficult to go deeper because there is no solitude. You're surrounded by children. You have your wife to take care of. You have your career that you, by justice, must engage in to provide for your family. But there's no question, and we see this in certain people, there are married men who, after years of marriage and the children grown up, receive the stigmata because they take advantage of the fact that now they have more free time and they use it to just dedicate themselves to the Lord, and they begin receiving amazing gifts and deep penetrations into the mystery of God's love. And so I don't think that this is wrong, but it's a very short chapter, and it doesn't really give a good treatment of the topic. And just by it alone, the bare words of it, one could be led into an undue stress, worrying about, oh my God, if I choose the wrong vocation, I'll be given just barely the breadcrumbs enough to be saved, but I won't be much good for anything else. It's just not true. That's not true. God is that good that if you choose something that was not his original intent and you press into him, there will be more than enough graces, not just to save you, but for you to be useful to him for the sake of others. Forgive me for the contradiction. I hope that made sense. If I submit my words to the church, to the doctors, to the mystics, to the fathers, if there's a whole corpus of evidence against what I've just said, then I bow out. But based on what I do know and based on what I've learned and experienced, these types of things are part of the reason why the conversation about vocation is so broken. People read these little snapshots in devotional books, and that becomes the lens. But there are other things to consider to build a proper perspective. So, God bless you. God love you. God's peace to you. Pray for me as I pray for you.